Yes, we are in fact live.
Yeah, we're actually live now.
We are actually live.
Hey.
Some people are now watching. We are in fact live.
Yeah, we're actually live now.
We are actually
Wake
live.
up. Hey. Show ready.
Some people are now watching. We are in fact. So that's great. The top of it. Yeah. Okay, it's working. Can you keep so I'm talking to Chrissy on it. Right, okay, so welcome to synthnatter. This is the first, sorry about the delay. We've had typical OBS technical problems, which hopefully we've now actually got over. Now, this is edition number 1. We're hoping to do this every 2 weeks or so, and every 2 weeks we're going to ask somebody that's interesting, that does different things, to come on and we'll talk about them. By all means, at me. If you want to me to ask Leah a question, by all means, at me in the comments, and I'll try and forward them to Leah. So, okay, so my guest tonight is one of the most eclectic musicians I know. An accomplished composer, arranger and producer, her albums consistently deliver something new, yet still managing to retain a unique voice. Outside of this, she project manages the Visconti Studio at Kingston University, has several articles published, and is currently commissioned to write on David Bowie's latest style. Please welcome Leah Kardos.
Hey, thank you for having me. What an honour. The very first synthnatter. Very cool.
What I haven't done is play the intro.
An intro, better play it.
We have an intro. So, Leah, I'm intrigued. Tell me all about the Stylophone.
The Stylophone. It's a little tiny analog synth. It's like a little toy. It sounds quite annoying. We ended up with lots of them because the guys from Debrec, that's Marcella and John, came round with like a car boot full of Stylophones and gave them to us at the uni. And one thing led to another, and I think in the course of a conversation, I promised to create a Stylophone orchestra, not really knowing what that meant or what it would look or sound like. And then we are a year later with a bunch of gigs under our belt and a few recordings, and yeah, we exist. I think we're the only group of our kind in the world.
Yeah, I think you quite possibly will be. Have you seen the modern ones? I was at Synthfest last year in Sheffield, and there was a small firm there that were doing these big deluxe versions with the same Stylophone idea, but with a whole lot of extra analog synth controls, with a controllable filter, oscillators, and envelopes, the usual box. Have you seen them?
Yeah, we've got one. It's called a Gen R8.
Wow.
It's like semi-modular and everything. It's like
wow.
Arpeggiator on there. It's really cool. And 2 oscillators, lots of great filters. They sent us one last year, just in time for the Space Oddity recording, and we sort of tried to figure out how to make it sound cool, and it's the synth solo you hear in the bridge is on that. We've also got like every Stylophone that exists. I think there's like a few others that have been discontinued. There's this one called the S2, which is like a sort of souped up Stylophone, but you can play it with your finger, and it also has 2 oscillators and like a ring modulator on it. So they've got some cool little bits and pieces. They're not all just toys.
Definitely. I never said that, and I've got nothing against toys. And I might have one of my future guests I'm hoping to get on is a chiptune expert, because I'm equally as fascinated about the chiptune scene, which is really, really becoming a thing now. So, but didn't of the original 1970s Stylophones, didn't they make a big one as well as the little ones?
Yeah, we've got a 350S, which is the one that's it's hard to explain. It looks like a typewriter, and it has like about 4 octaves on there. And it also has 2 styluses, one that will allow you to do like an intermittent rhythm, and it has kind of like an organ. It has different harmonics that you can add to create different timbres. We have one of those, and it's like a vintage piece that.
Oh.
Well, yeah, but they gifted all of this stuff to us. We're so lucky.
That really is good luck. And you know, look after them because what you're doing is really, really unique. So you went on to do your own cover of Space Oddity, which we'll play in a sec, which is really quite a stunning piece.
Oh, thank you.
You got Tony Visconti to produce it, which is a major coup in itself. How did all this come about?
Well, Tony was in on it kind of from the start because he's attached to the Stylophone legacy through Space Oddity and producing Bowie during that album, which features the Stylophone. And of course, Stylophone doesn't have that many pop stars that have used the instrument, except for Bowie, Kraftwerk, and Rolf Harris. So they're trying to sort of hang on to the Bowie thing because I think he's cool, or at least he was cool at the moment. So they got Tony to judge a competition for the 50th anniversary of Space Oddity, which was coming up or something. Or it might have been the 50th anniversary of the instrument itself. And that's how I got to meet them, because Tony met them at work at Visconti Studio, and then that's how I got the instruments. And so Tony was sort of always pro Stylophone anyway, because he was working with them. And then I did the version of Space Oddity, and we gigged it a few times. And it happened to be the 50th anniversary of that song that year. And so we kind of cooked up an idea to record it, and Tony was up for it, and it just all sort of came together really nicely. It was just a really cool thing to do.
I just about remember it. Being a bit old and a bit farty, I just about remember it when I was very, very young. And
Right.
my memory of it is the Mick Rock video with him strumming the acoustic guitar with the orange hair behind the mixing desk, and the view up the effects rack and
That's
the view of the oscillator. I still watch it every so often, regularly on YouTube. It's a cracking song. There's never been a song like it. As it the case with most of David Bowie's greatest output, he was so unique as a songwriter and as a composer that he's created this, for me at least, he's created this legacy of stuff that impacts my own composition, as I'm sure it does a fair few others. You know, Philip Glass himself has done the Hero Symphony and several works based on the Berlin trilogy. It's great. What more can you say? What I really liked about your version of it is you kept the central concept of it. You kept the hand claps in there. You kept the overall structure of the sound. You didn't have the Mellotron, which is fair enough. You did that with the Stylophones. Poor old Rick. But you really captured the absolute feel of it. I've got a picture of you here together when, presume it was around the time when you first formed in, you first did this. So there you all are, yourself seated in the control room of the Visconti Studio. I could just see Tony in the background, just very discreetly popping his head in the corner, which is so cool.
The company made us these shirts, the Kingston University Stylophone Orchestra shirts, and then we had a special one made for Tony, and it had Big Tone written on the back, which I thought was because it's a joke, because the Stylophone does not have a big tone. So
I don't know, depends on what you put it in. If you put it through a whopping great big Marshall amp, it can have a pretty big tone. Yeah. Yeah, it's always what you do with it. Okay, so getting back to it, I'm going to play you now your version of Space Oddity. It really seriously is stunning. I've tweeted about this several times on Twitter, and I've put a link on it on Facebook. I had no idea this was going to happen because I saw some of your tweets, But when I actually saw this in reality, it's one of these moments where, okay, I'm going to stop and look at this and take this in. Here we go. That was great. still works even now, and I've heard that so many times. I'd still be very, very pleased with it if I'd have done that myself.
We were surprised at how the Stylophones sounded because up until that point, we'd just been going through a mixer into a series of effects, and that was our sound at that point. So we were going into a 16-channel split and then into a parametric EQ to knock off all those highs and then to stick it through some reverb and then for that to come through the mixer. And when we went to the studio, Tony was like, no, we're going to record you like a real orchestra and stick mics down, and you're just going to take the headphone jacks out and you're just going to play through the little speakers. And, and we've never done that before, and actually it sounded really cool. It meant that we had to be really tight, which we were hoping that we could just record, the 12 of us separately and edit it later. But of course, no, I was there conducting it, and we had to get it right. But it was really cool. It felt like a real orchestra during that session. And it sounded great together. I think everyone hearing each other quite clearly made the difference too.
I think so, because, and I'm sure this is one of the topics you explore in the Visconti Studio, there really was something in those days about the workflow of getting musicians together in the studio, not worrying about how it visually looks on the door, because there were no doors then, it was all tape. I've been there myself. Yeah. The great thing about it is having the musicians together so you can react off each other, and whether it be rhythmically or whether it be melodically, you can get this lovely frisson going between all of you, and that's really where the buzz comes from. Rick Beato on YouTube has been on about this time and time again, and he's absolutely right. And I really think even in stuff, certainly with Tangerine Dream, I happen to know that one of the ways they used to work was they'd plug all their synths in, have a few drinks, plug all their synths in, and just go and see what they come up with. And they'd tape it, and if it sounded crap, they'd say, oh, okay, it sounds a bit shit, we'll have another go, we'll try something else. And eventually, when they got it as they pretty much wanted it, particularly when doing their soundtracks, they'd roll the tape and they'd play. And in that big studio, what I'm told is they would pick the synths up, group them around themselves as they did live, and just simply go for it, and and then repair the damage afterwards. And there's something about that. There's that frisson.
There's something about ensemble, I think, and playing with and listening to others and playing and hearing yourself in that sound together, which is different than the kind of atomized DI layering up your own tracks on top of each other type of way we're doing it these days. But of course it requires more rehearsal, more preparation.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, because sometimes that means that it's tighter or it's more musical or it's more developed, And so it's just a different way of working that's valuable.
Yeah, and also it allows the music to actually breathe, I think. It allows the musicians to actually explore the music in those rehearsals and maybe bring up things that they wouldn't otherwise do if they were just doing this track by track by track.
Yeah.
I certainly know when I was in a signed band, going back 20 odd years ago, we did 2 albums. We did one where the producer at the time absolutely insisted on working track by track by track. So we'd record the drums, then the rhythm guitar, then at some point I'd get to put my guitar on. It was extremely laborious. The end result, all of us said, it's not rock and roll. It doesn't represent us. It's not what we do. Second time we made the second recording, the guy was much more clued up about ensembles and about groups in general. And what he did is he had us in the space, he would put the baffle boards up between all the amps, he would mic all the amps up, and we would play as if it was 1972. And the result was so much better. And he was working digital then, so it's so seldom not actually what's behind the glass, but how the front of the glass is being arranged.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah. It's about energy, isn't it? And it's about everyone's mood and all of this creativity together. It's so important.
Yeah, and that comes across. Got some good comments coming in. Lots of people saying amazing, more musicianship, more communication between players. Yep, definitely agree with that. Chrissy says we always do a helicopter quartet like that, and of course we do CSMA like that, and there's plenty of videos of us doing just that. I'll take my equipment up to Chrissy's, we'll I normally get squashed in the corner somewhere because there's not much room in there, and that's pretty much how we work. And I think it makes a big difference. One other thing I have to say is Chrissy was absolutely adamant with me. She said, "Do not, under any circumstances, mention the H word. No, do not even go there." You actually did that. I'm glad it was you and not me. That means I can sleep at night. H word being Harris.
Fair enough.
I was under very strict orders. Do not, under any circumstances, mention that. Okay, I won't. So it's great. But yeah, and I think this goes on to really what the Visconti Studio is about. Is that you've got this lovely live room there, which is fabulous. I've seen the pictures of it. Is it octagonal?
It's octagonal. It's so great. I mean, it has such a great acoustic in there, which is really musical and quite special. I think I've been working in there so much that I can recognize the sound now on the productions that come from their studio. So it's nice to have a kind of signature ambience to a space.
I'm kind of hoping you're going to start the turn back towards actually having musicians playing together in the studio.
It seems like all we do there. I mean, every session that I've observed that's been like a commercial outside session that's come in, they've all worked that way. It's all been like setting up the instruments in the space, setting up, making sure, spend a few days getting the mics and the baffling right, and then just letting them go. And it's really inspiring because that's just, I think the space invites that. We've got really good musical instruments all scattered through. We've got the 3 grand pianos and obviously all the percussion, all the bits. So it's kind of an environment perfect for that type of music making.
And tell me, because you're also working with the Science Museum. We've got a sort of feed from this as well. What's happening there?
Well, we put in a research bid that had the Science Museum on board and the British Library on board, and it was all about heritage and about specifically protecting the London studio heritage of the 70s, which was this sort of amazing intense moment where the best technology was being developed, that from going 8 to 16 track, and then all the stuff that Trident were doing, Malcolm Toft, etc., and then on and on. And the producers and the spaces and we wanted to protect all of that because a lot of the guys that were around that scene at the time, they're kind of starting to drop off. They're kind of getting to that age, and they're taking so much knowledge with them. And because the studio system as a way of learning and coming up the ranks, that whole system's collapsed. There's no way that people can learn that stuff unless they're just around that practice. And so the idea was that the Visconti Studio was going to be one of the locations where we were going to protect that kind of heritage by inviting people into work and then documenting the work and also allowing students to learn in that environment. And so we're working with the British Library because they have their archives, and obviously the Science Museum because of the technology aspect, because they've got a lot of really good pieces. And so that's where that comes from.
I'm really glad about it. And this is actually happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it's happening. Obviously, the landscape of academic funding is very, unpredictable. But there's a lot of goodwill on all sides. We want to make it happen. So, bits and pieces, as funding becomes available, we mount projects and we do things. And, hopefully we can do something big. We just have to hit the gold with a good, big chunk of money from the Arts Council. We'll keep trying.
I think I was actually quite lucky because I started all this in the 1980s, and that was kind of a halfway house between the 1970s, very strictly analogue. Digital was coming in, but they were still doing things workflow-wise the old way. There was still slicing tape, even though by this time Fairlights and Akai samplers were then getting very, very commonplace, but certainly the Akais anyway. But they were still slicing tape, and they were still working with, get some guys in, let's lay down some good tracks. And it made a huge difference. Certainly, I was very fortunate enough to learn microphone technique then, just by being in the studio and being able to ask some very sort of nosy questions about what they were using and how they were using it. And like yourself, I do think that when all this collapsed, all of a sudden in the last decade, people coming in that want to produce their own material, that got access to being able to purchase this stuff now, but fundamentally don't have this training, don't have this experience of knowing how to make something good, not just by the quality of the mic, but where you situate it.
Yeah, all of that stuff. You can go to as many lectures as you want and watch as many webinars from the Abbey Road Institute as you can pay for. You're not going to learn it until you're actually in the room and working as part of a team that's building that. So I really believe that. And so it's all about learning through doing and making mistakes and having a safe space where you can watch people that are actually connected to those heritages from the past and to connect all the dots together and say, well, okay, they do that, I can do that. And it's about copying, isn't it? And about adapting practice,
it is.
Developing your own.
I have got one particular memory of playing on a friend's session, and this was in the really great studio that was out in the Cotswolds, Trippin Norton, back in the day. And I had the unfortunate thing is I had an earth loop. I used to play a Strat in those days, and as you well know, if you put a Strat anywhere near any sort of distortion, there's lots of electronics. The pickups, of course, pick it up. Although I had the middle pickup wound in the opposite direction, so if you put it in out of phase, it will cancel. Didn't want an out of phase sound. I wanted a real screaming sound. And the sound engineer did two things. Firstly, he disabled the earth on the big valve amp I was plugged into. That was shocking enough. Second, but the worst bit was I was standing on this bare copper cable, barefoot, which is kind of, so if that amp blows up, I'm toast. I'm just going to be fried. It's going to go through it and go right the way down there. I'm just going to be fried. It's going to make an awful burning smell as well.
Yeah, it's going to smell a bit bad, yeah.
Fortunately, that didn't happen and I lived to tell the tale. But yeah, this is one of the techniques and the foibles and the ways they got around stuff back then. I don't know, they've never actually told me how many people actually got killed in this process.
Right, yeah. I tell you though, we did a whole analog session with Chris Kimsey, who's from Olympic, and he's developing Olympic's new facility there. And he's lovely, and he's the guy who edited all the Stones records. So one of his stories is that there's a 20-minute jam session of some girls where Mick sings about every girl and type of girl on the planet, and then they say to him, "Can you just edit it down to 3 minutes?" And for the single, and they leave him alone to do it. And he's showing the students how it's done, and you can see the muscle memories come back. You can see him just picking up, licking this, put that there, and it's amazing. And we got to capture all of that. And I think that kind of material heritage, the actual technique, the one that was used, I think that's so important. As just as a research thing, just to have a documentation of, because so often all those stories from the past become mythologized. They become this kind of thing where there's an aura of magic. Oh, it's just geniuses in magic spaces and blessed studios and just, and that's all bullshit. It's, it's actual hard work and real techniques that get lost, in the storytelling.
Yeah, there's a lot of romanticism going on about music. In all the genres of music, there's all sorts of this concept of the romantic genius that goes out and has this marvellous, its ideas transmitted straight to him from God, and he's illuminated, and genius strikes. Reality is, of course, it's hard work, lots of mistakes, lots of scrunching up of paper, and lots of pressing the delete key, and all of that. That's the reality of it.
I think the word genius is actually an insult in many ways because it negates everyone's hard work. It just erases everyone's effort and their training and their mastery, which is usually really hard won. Just to call someone a genius, I think, is really lazy. Anyway.
Yeah, there we go. So, Mellotrons. I well remember the tweet that you'd ordered a Mellotron from Streetley Electronics.
I remember you told me not to do it. I remember you saying, "Don't do it. You'll have."
I did. I put my hands up. I did. I said, "Don't do it. It's all going to go horribly wrong. The tapes are going to jam.
That's right.
You can get samplers." Nonetheless, you did it, and it was a great success. And okay, here we go. I'm eating my words now.
I love that thing so much. It's got. I tell you what, it isn't much more than what a sampler can do. You can make a sampler do what it does, but it is different, and playing it is different, and it also has its peculiarities. It has its strangeness. It's a little bit wonky. The tapes are a little bit stretched. It's this analog aspect, which it sort of starts to melt and bend and become a little bit idiosyncratic, and just to play it as well is just a thing. It is different, and that's what I'm interested in as a musician, as a creative musician, is how does this interface, this instrument, this synth, whatever it is I'm working on, how does it change the way I feel about music, how I perceive music ideas, how they come to me and how they come out of my hands. And then that to me is like the affordance of that thing. That justifies this thing to me. It gives me these ideas. It makes me interact with it in a certain way. And the Mellotron definitely gives me loads of that.
Now, can you play it in tune? That's the $1 million question.
Well, it has this knob on the side. It's quite crude, but it goes like a tone in each direction. So you could nudge it if it's a little bit flat. It's usually a bit flat, but the thing is, all the tapes are different. So sometimes one note will be flat, and another one will be a little bit sharp. But what you'll find is that when you put that in a mix, actually the out of tuneness is the aesthetic, and it's what sets it apart and gives it that Mellotron sound, is the fact that it's out of tune. Particularly if you put it through a really nice plate reverb and then have that sitting behind. That's unmistakable. That's the sound of the instrument.
I did. I've got a picture of it here for everybody, and there you are, blonde hair as you were then.
That's right.
And you'd just taken charge of it. You'd had it delivered from Streetly Electronics.
I was euphoric with happiness. I was just the happiest person on the planet when that arrived.
You do look it. You do look it. Are you using the original tapes, or did you commission new tapes, or?
No, well, the tapes were quote unquote new. They were copied from the originals, but the guys at Streetly gave me a list of potential sounds that I could have in there, and it's actually available on their website. All the sounds that are available,
right.
And so you can choose some Mark I, Mark II Chamberlain sounds, and a few others that are kind of famous. So the ones that are like King Crimson, the one that was on Wonderwall,
hey!
all this. Yeah, and you can grab them, and obviously the Mark II Beatlesy ones. And so I got most of the iconic ones that I could, and a few strange ones as well. But you can choose, and I chose, and there's 24. So each bank has 3 sounds, and you can actually, on the tape, it's 3 sounds on the single tape, and then the playhead just moves between them. And you can actually go halfway, so you can have some sounds that are straddling others. So to think about how it's ordered, you'd think, well, shall I have the choirs and the strings next to each other? Shall I have the woodwinds and the brass next to each other? So I can potentially blend them. And so that's quite nice as well. That's
nice. Question. Chrissy asks, what sort of bands do you get in the Visconti Studio?
What sort of
bands? Genre, as in genre of music, type of bands? We
do get bands and artists. So Tony brings in people like Ralph McTell.
Really?
Yeah, he's
and it's still going
at Visconti. Yeah, last year it came out.
Good for him.
Yeah, I know, and because that's like full circle, because obviously the second recording he ever made in the late 60s or early 70s was Tony, and obviously Tony's wife Mary Hopkin was on there. So to have them together again was really nice. We've had like Latin, jazz, we've had orchestras in there, but of course bands are attracted to it because of the format, because we've got the analog tape, and because of the workflow that room provides. So Chris Porter, who's a producer who's most well known for producing Wham and George Michael, brought in this band, and he's brought them in a few times, and he just locks the place out for like 48 hours and it does like 12 live rhythm takes, and then goes away and comes back. And just the way that these guys can work the room and just get the music done, it's amazing to watch. And so bands and drum, bands that have drums generally do their stuff there, but I make my records there, and I don't really do that either. So I think it's pretty eclectic in terms of, and we have choirs in there too. So lots of different styles.
But it's basically, you've got the acoustic space, so it's basically anybody that wants to make that sound acoustically, i.e. going through speakers and being mic'd up, it's absolutely perfect for it.
Yeah.
Does the Mellotron get used by any of the bands that come in?
Sometimes the bands that come in are a little bit hesitant to use it because they've generally rehearsed with their own synths or their own sound design. But when we had Mary Epworth in, Will was part of the band, and he was all over the Mellotron playing lots. And the students actually love using the Mellotron, and they're in there in a more creative, capacity because they've got constant access, so they can, think that's what's there. I'm going to write music for it and then bring it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen a few people just using it as a drinks table, and it does make me sad.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no, that's not good.
I know,
That's not
God.
good. I've got my own problems. It's bad enough in here. Just yesterday I very nearly trashed one of my sequencers because I had a can of Coca on the side here by it, and of course I upended it and it went everywhere. And as you can imagine,
tables. I mean, they're just at the right height. It's so easy to do.
That's good. They used to be great for putting synths on top of as well, which just about everybody who had one used to do back in the day. Has anybody gone in there and played Watch Your Disguise, the famous Genesis track?
Not yet.
Famous Mellotrons. No?
We didn't do that. Yeah, no, not yet.
I have to say, if I were passing and I could get in and it was there, that would be my own sort of personal guilty pleasure, would be to play that. That and a King Crimson track as well, and I think that would be one of these things. But
what everyone does play is they all play the intro to Strawberry Fields Forever, and they play the strings from Space Oddity.
Yeah,
that's like the one that everyone wants to hear. But
that's fair enough. But you were talking about at the time having a budget to buy some more vintage synths for the studio.
Yeah, look, I had a budget, and we were buying gear, and I was consulting with Tony, like, what do we need to get, and he gave me a few key pieces that we need to get. So obviously we need to get the Eventide harmonizer and all that.
It's got to be a mini Moog in there. If there wasn't a mini Moog to be acquired in there, I would be very shocked.
We've got a couple of Moog pieces, but we don't have the mini Moog. I keep my eye out. I kind of want to get a Voyager as well, because I just think that's a really nice synth, and I'd like to find one. I was looking for an EMS synthy, and I was following some thread to like the guy who designed it down in like Devon or something.
Robin Wood.
Yeah, I was getting there. I wanted to find it, and then just didn't happen in the last minute, and then I ran out of money. I ended up spending most of it. So yeah. But I've always got in the back of my mind, we've got this separate room at the uni, which is like a synth lab, and every year if there's a bit of cash left over, we chuck some in there, like some mono synths, a couple polys. Got like the Moog mother, we've got that. So we've got a few bits and pieces, and it's all networked up via MIDI so that the students can fire up Logic or Ableton and control them all. So we've been putting pieces in there and not really housing them in the studio because they're just so nickable in the studio when they're small.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. I must say, on the EMS front, you're probably aware that Behringer are planning to clone it.
Yeah, I know. God bless Behringer, ruining the market for everyone else. But like that Poly D, all of that. I love all the stuff they're doing, and they did an art as well, haven't they?
I've got a couple. Of the modules here. I've got the
Model D,
and I've got the Neutron, and they're quite good. I'm not sure it's our live gig with them. I think they're a little bit wibbly at times. Wibbly. Their tuning tends to fluctuate quite a bit, more so than, let's say, on my Matrix Brute or on Chrissy's Moog Sub 37, which are both absolutely rock solid. I love them. I love them in my studio because they're wibbly.
Yeah. Of course.
The tuning is always a moot thing, to be honest with you, and I'm sure you know this yourself as a producer. Particularly with analog synths, if everything's perfectly in tune, you end up with quite a thin, boring sound, and ultimately sounds like an organ. When they start drifting, that's when the magic can start to happen.
Well, that's also the crucial difference between the analog hardware and like a software emulation. And you know, if you're going to pay all that extra money and go to the effort of having a piece of gear, it should have some characteristics. It should have a few little wibbles, I think. That's what gives it its personality and the reason why you choose it.
Exactly. I see them as instruments. I don't see them particularly just simply as sound providers. I see them as instruments. And a different architecture can really make you think about what you're doing in a different way. The architecture on the Matrix Brute is very, very different from the architecture on the Model D. Because of that, both of them make you think differently about what you're going to create and what you're going to try and do. So there is that. The interface can make a massive difference with these things.
Yeah, and that's the reason why you're into it, isn't it? It's the same as what I was saying before. It's the way that the instrument makes you respond to it is the value of the instrument in your collection, definitely.
That's actually something I really don't get from soft synths. I used to be a massive fan of them.
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago. I honestly thought they were the answer to all my dreams and all my problems. The reality is, they all start to sound the same after a while.
Yeah, and also the fact that you're playing it through a MIDI keyboard or sending programming through it, to me, just is like that one step removed from the sound design and from the instrument and the instrument performer relationship. So, not to say I don't use them. I use them all the time.
Yeah. I mean, Chrissy's problem that she has with them is because she's a professional programmer. It's not something she wants to be doing in the spare time because it's so mousy, clickety, even if you add controllers. I like Absinthe. I mean, that generates some really interesting textures.
Yeah.
But also, oddly enough, I find that they work best as accompanying background sounds. You can't really burn with them in the same way that you can with, having a mini Moog on, cranking the volume up, actually having those knobs to play with in real time.
Yeah, I think the sound design in real time is another aspect as well. Is if I'm working in the DAW, I'm tempted to, even if I do some controller assignments to do something live, I'll always end up tweaking it and perfecting it and going into the automation and fixing the line or something. Yeah. Whereas, if I've done it on a synth and it's now printed as a wave, the accidents and the things that my first impulse would have been to fix, actually I start to love, and it starts to become characterful, and it starts to become a feature that I'm fond of. And I think that's just like me in my own mind games of sometimes I'll do something, not execute it perfectly. My instinct is to quickly perfect it. And I think if I'm in the software domain, I'll tend to do that. I'll tend to over edit myself. And if I'm in an analog domain, I tend to let it go. And the letting go of it just breeds a different atmosphere in the music, I think, for me. And certainly as a creative person, it builds in a different way. It's less precise. It's more free for me anyway, and how I feel about it. Might not be what the listener perceives, but you can't do anything about that.
No, you can't. What I would add to that is it's quite interesting where some people have actually got both worlds. Kate Bush, for example, gets these marvellously, very, very carefully programmed, highly detailed backgrounds, but then she'll have something on the top of that that's completely free-flowing. And then she'll put a voice on top of that, which she really performs with tremendous emotive power. And getting those three things together, when she gets it really right, The Sensual World, for example, is a favourite album of mine, then the experience is unbelievably powerful. I saw her do her residency at the Labatt's Apollo. I was extremely lucky to see that, extremely lucky. And I must admit, when I first thought about it, I thought, what's she going to do? Is this going to be very, very backing track led, which I'd have no problem with, because I guess she's going to do an extremely theatrical show. But she got the music to really gel, to really kick.
Yeah. Do you remember King of the Mountain and how much it rocked out?
Yeah.
I was in my chair just rocking. Me and Liz were sat next to each other just going crazy. It was so good.
And I loved the way she brought the darkness in with that percussion device that guy was swinging round to make that sound. She really suddenly brought this great cloud of darkness over, and then went into the ninth wave. Brilliantly executed. Really wish you'd have released a DVD of it.
Lucky are we that we got to see it, though. Amazing.
Yeah. I kind of hope she does more, because there's so much more in her to come out yet. I personally think 11 Words for Snow was terrific, and
I'm all about Ariel. I just think it's a masterpiece. I love it so much. And to have her to perform the whole second side of it at that gig was just so magical. So good.
Yeah.
Comes out with like those crow wings at the end and flies off. Oh,
Yeah.
it was like perfect theatre, but also such a great rock gig as well.
It was, but also I think she was extremely shrewd in that she didn't attempt to do any of her famous dancing that she'd done in the past. And I'm really glad she didn't, because one of the things about powerful people, particularly in film and in theatre, is very powerful people don't move much. It's the people around them that do the moving.
Okay.
And she kind of got the centre by doing that. Chrissy said to me some time ago that she went to see Roger Waters do his version of The Wall. And she said it was a complete egomaniacal adventure. It was totally the biggest ego you can imagine. So the thing is, Eric Clapton was playing guitar, and he just stood there with his guitar and dominated it. So you had Roger Waters' colossal inflated ego. You had all the back projections, the wall which gets knocked down at the end, all of that stuff. And all it took was somebody to hold the stage and just simply play. Just stay still, stay focused, and play with the power that's within. And I remember her saying that, and I've seen that myself with other people many times. You know, you'll get somebody sort of flapping around like this and trying to draw attention to themselves, and there'll be one person that just stands there or sits there and just does it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think you're right. I'm thinking back to, I've only seen videos on YouTube of the Tour of Life, which she did in '79, and that was like some kind of like all singing, all dancing West End sort of production.
Right. Chrissy said it was actually the pros and cons of hitchhiking, not The Wall.
Okay.
But it's similar thing, and I've heard other people say similar. So it's obviously, you know, that was obviously a thing. But yeah, way forward. So moving forwards, your album Bird Rib.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. It's really good.
So Bird Rib is it started. I don't know if it's an interesting story, but I'll tell it anyway. So I was asked many years ago to put together a playlist for a radio station in Australia, and I mixed it to tape because I was learning tape editing at work. I was just mixing it to tape. And then that tape ended up living in the studio as like a teaching aid for me for a while. And so this tape had my music on it, but I was using it to show students how to edit and chop and whatnot. And I was in the studio with a student, teaching them how to master the tape, and I showed them how to clean the heads, put the tape on this. She put it on backwards and also put it on at the wrong speed. And so, and I'm trying to concentrate on being a good teacher, but at the same time, I'm like, whoa, this sounds so cool. Like, I love the sound of my music backwards at half speed. And I was really so distracted. And at the end of the session, took her out of there, and I quickly bounced it into Pro Tools and took it away with me, and I named it like, you know, EP, like I want to do something with this, and I held on to it for a while. And I think I wanted to do it last summer, and for whatever reason I just didn't get the time, and then it just sort of started working on it in bits and pieces, just looking at this backwards material and what it could be and what it could become. And I had all these extra like bits and pieces that I'd sliced into it from Ricochet and all sorts, and so that became the theme of working with like self-cannibalizing my own music, but looking at it in different ways and backwards forwards. And then the backwards forwards thing meant that I was thinking about palindromes. And then that kind of led to a nice, neat little idea for me as a way of just sort of exploring tone and not necessarily thinking this is a post-classical record or this is an ambient record, but just thinking this material that I've got, it speaks to me in a way, and what does it kind of want to be? And then kind of just making it into what it wanted to be as far as I was concerned. And that's why it ended up becoming a little bit trip-hop, a bit IDM, a bit whatever. But because it's all kind of from the same material bag of stuff, it kind of hangs together. So that's what Bird Rib's about. And it's not actually research. Like a lot of my other stuff was part of PhDs or research, practice research into a research question. This is like a rare thing for me where I just made it because I wanted to. And that's the thing about it that's a bit different as well.
I really find it a very, very interesting album, as all of your albums are. The others I could kind of get the concept of. Feather Hammer was all about the piano. Machines was all about spam emails. voiced beautifully. With Bird Rape, what I found really intriguing is the tracks were really different, radically quite different. And I was trying to think, well, with Leah, there's normally a concept underneath all of this, but I hadn't actually spotted it. So if that was what the concept was,
it's a pretty loose one, but that's what it was. It was every track is just made out of some materials that I'd taken from this tape that I had. And some of it was sped up, so it was quick. Some of it was really slow. Some of it, like the backwards piano bits from Ben's stuff that I did in Heavy Hands, just things that I had on tape. And a bit of a grab bag. But it was fun to do, and it felt good to just not have a kind of intellectually complex relationship with my music, but just do it because it feels nice and do it because I think that's what it wants to be. And that was a nice experience as well, after so much, research heavy engagement with my music. So
generally your stuff tends to feel right anyway, so somewhere along the line you may start off with a concept, but I kind of gain the impression that somewhere along the line that your own filter comes in, you say, no, I can make that a little bit sweeter, I can make that a little bit nicer, I can, we might start with this concept, but kind of let's move it forward, let's not make it such a strict thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I really care about, I want people to listen to it, and I want people to engage with it. And a lot of academic music it doesn't give a concession for that. It's kind of, it doesn't allow people points of access to enjoying it. And it really is important for me in my philosophy for people to engage with my music and understand it. And so I do make lots of effort to make sure that it's accessible. And it's also music that I like. I mean, a lot of my taste is in there, as it is for everybody.
Yeah.
Music, even though I'm a composer, I love pop, and so that gets in there.
And I think that's perfectly legitimate. I could go on, if I start talking about what I think about some of the contemporary classical people, my blood pressure will go through the roof and I'll probably have a heart attack, so I've got to avoid that. But one of the things I noticed, certainly when I've been to HCMF on occasion, the ones that really make it are the ones that will say, right, this is the concept of this, but I'm going to make a piece out of it. Too many of those ideas are just that. They're ideas for pieces, but they don't actually get around to actually making it into a piece. At least what it feels like.
I agree, and I think a lot of the time as well, it's also quite intense. There's a lot of ideas packed in.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I've just started recently writing reviews occasionally for The Wire, and they sent me William Basinski's latest record. It's amazing. It's just like lo-fi hip hop. It's amazing. Like, it's just beats and euphoric, luxurious lounge music with jazz, but with like cuts, and it's like Flying Lotus. And I remember listening to it and thinking, if one of America's, most well-known experimental composers who came up the way he did, and he's known for his, intellectual interrogation of decay and transience through his disintegration loops, and he's just released this record that's just full of good vibes, and I just love it. I felt that. I was just like, I'm into that. Like, it sounds good and feels good and makes people, it's a loving thing. It's not trying to challenge people or to exert your intellectual superiority over your listeners. It's not like trying to say, I'm so deep and complicated and here's some darkness for you to chew on for an hour. It's like saying, no, look, here's just a gentle bath of music and it's going to make it. And so I really loved that. It's really good. It's called To Feel Embraced, and it's out now, I think.
Cool. Listeners, check it out. It will be well worth listening to. I know William Basinski's work quite well. They always, I think one of the big things with William is there's always a line of entertainment going on in there underneath it all. He's never forgotten the point that if you are a musician or a writer or anything like this, underneath it all comes the need and really the responsibility to try and communicate.
Well, he started jazz, didn't he? And I think that jazz, that communicative, expressive nature of his music is something that I really appreciate. It sounds like that's what you're talking about, this idea of sort of, saying something, making sure that the message can be decoded.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, I've been working with a friend of mine. I've produced his last album, and he wants me to produce his next album. And he's very much an algorithmic composer, problem I've got is his algorithm for beginners, for starters, is far too simple. So I'm forever trying to loosen it up. I'm forever putting some lovely little delays in the channels on some of the instruments just to free it up a bit with some nice reverbs and really, really subtle ambience just to kind of let it breathe. You know,
is it a bit to the grid? Is it just a little bit?
It's totally to the grid.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he has this particular aesthetic whereby he'll have the one algorithm and he'll do 5 or 6 tracks using that same algorithm. So, well, as I said to him the other day, the trouble is, if somebody reviews this, they only need to listen to one track, because although you've changed the sounds in the other tracks, it's still the same algo, and we can all hear that. You know, just think about breaking it.
Maybe it's his favourite sound. He just wants
to be, you know, I've tried to do the sort of Brian Eno approach and said to him, yeah, okay, how about internalise it, get off the grid and break it? What would happen? Would the world end?
Send him a pack of oblique strategy cards and see if that will help free him into some of the other areas.
He actually has them.
Does he?
He has them. It's had no effect. No effect at all. Other crueler people have suggested I introduce him to illegal substances, which I'm not going to do in any state of mind. For one thing, I don't do those substances myself, despite what some people seem to think when they listen to my music. I definitely do not do that sort of thing. But yeah, it's what I'm going to try and do as a composer is to try and free him up a bit. Anyway, it's supposed to be done. So, tell me about Sporks. Why is it called Sporks?
Into Sporks. So there's a couple of like sort of wonky, drenched keyboard bits I had on the tape, and I also had some sort of clanging around, and I sped it up, and then from there I went to the kitchen and I recorded a bunch of sounds in the kitchen, like, you know, cutlery and wine glasses and things rattling around. And so when I put it together, I was definitely thinking of a homage to 90s era IDM, like, you know, your FX Twin, your Square Pusher, that sort of thing. And I was sort of making it as like a love letter to that. But at the same time, just thinking, this just sounds like someone in the kitchen just mad cooking. And so in the back of my head, I was like, this is someone whipping together a really great dish of some kind. And that's kind of how I imagined it. And that's why I called it Into Sporks, because I quite liked sporks. And I had these gold ones that I bought, and we were using them in the house. And so I used them in the recording. And then, yeah, we made a video of baking. And it's funny because, you know, I was making some videos like for the first time ever as part of the process. And this is the one that Biggo and Tuggetti weren't impressed with. This is the one they didn't like.
Oh, right.
So I released my own. They were like, I just don't see this baking video being very relevant. And I'm like, well, okay.
But I must admit, I really liked it. I liked the playfulness of it.
Yeah.
And I think that really opened up a whole new dimension, that whole playfulness and that fun aspect. Never underestimate fun in music. You know?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so serious. I mean, especially with, you know, I love my label. They're really supportive and great to me. But sometimes the atmosphere of all this sort of, you know, thing was just a lot of sort of very introspective people staring off into the distance, writing songs called Distance, or, you know, like, it's all very... it's a bit aspirational for me. You know, I just wanted to do something funny and a little bit. But that goes back to Ricochet as well. That was a reaction to just a little bit of wit, a little bit of charm, a little bit of a wink. Yeah. You know, it didn't have to be so solemn all the time. Craving that, and I think that's where that comes from.
You did the video yourself, didn't you?
Yeah. My friend Charlotte, who goes by the name Restoration Cakes, is an amazing baker. And I just went over there with some cameras and said, let's make a cake. And she made this amazing key lime pie, 2 of them, and I took them both home. It was so good, really delicious.
They didn't last to take it. That was it. Gone.
So tasty.
I think the thing also I really like about it is there's lots of people who've done baking pieces, and most of them have been terrible because they've taken themselves so seriously. But this really brings out the fun. And this really brings out the fun of food and another side of life. There's certainly a mentality amongst the ambient crowd that they take life so seriously. I I did a couple of live streams, and it was called Quarren Stream, and it was a similar process that we all plugged our synths in and went for it. And so many of them were all engaging with this mentality of that we're all in isolation, and we're all quarantined, and we're all dislocated, and I kind of wanted to get totally away from all of that. I absolutely refused to engage with that. I wanted to say, yeah, but you still got your mind. Go into your mind, and in your mind, go out into the landscape in your mind. There's just because you're on your own doesn't mean to say that you can't function. You can function. This is a time to use you and talk about you. So it was a similar thing. So they were all making this really heavy, sort of deep stuff, and I just went for it, and I DJ'd, and I just had a laugh.
I totally hear you. I mean, I think sometimes there's obviously a time and space for that melancholia and that, all of that. Yeah, I love that. But also at the same time, there's light and shade. There's also room in the scene for a little bit of a laugh, a bit of a giggle. And music is such an emotional world for me that it doesn't always have to be this kind of memories and distance and pain and heartbreak and loneliness and isolation, and sometimes creating the music that's a bit more cheerful and a bit more cute or whatever is good medicine for me as a person.
I don't think it's for other things. Again, there's this romanticism involved. You have to suffer as an artist, and
romanticism is the word that pops up again. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, it's all this. Anyway, so I'm going to play Into Sports. The video to this is lovely. The music's great.
You get to learn how to make a cake. It's educational as well.
You could make a cake with it. I haven't attempted it, but I'm sure some people will do. Here we go. it's great. It's really great how that came up. Been some comments and questions. Tom asks who you use for a distributor of your music.
I think Big O and Twiggetti use Believe for the distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There's been some other comments. Tom also says it makes him nostalgic for working with 16-track in an analog studio, and me too in many ways. I might add though, when I was working for somebody who's now quite a well-known soundtrack composer, but he pretty much has cornered the Strictly thing. I had an experience just prior to MIDI that we would try syncing by using SMPTE. So you'd lay a SMPTE track down on one of the tracks, and it had to be at the far end of the tape, otherwise it would print through. And of course, in my naivety, I was winding the tape forwards and backwards, putting various overdubs on, and I stretched the tape. So it was actually one of these rare people to actually have a drum machine behave like a drummer and either speed up or slow down, depending on how the tape went. Oh yeah, I think great fun. But yeah, lots of great comments like that. Chrissy says, yep, sometimes it's great to just do music. Yep, completely agree. Where do we go? Look at Spot. Chrissy says sporks are in. I have to confess, I had no idea what sporks actually were. So I've learned something today. Tom also said what ingredients are in the description. He's missing those steps. Tom, slow the vid down. You can do it in YouTube. Slow the vid down.
I put everything in there you need to know. So.
But yeah. Oh, run over time again. Thank you very much, Leah, for this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honoured that this is the first one, and I get to be your first guest.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's great. And we're going to do the next one in 2 weeks' time. Subject to two people, depending on who actually confirms for the date. So follow us on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. Certainly follow Leah on Twitter. You can find her at Leah Kardos on Twitter. Really easy to find. You'll keep up to date with all her projects, what she's going to be doing in the future, and I'm sure we're going to hear many more interesting things from you, and lots more yet. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for tuning in. It's gone over time a bit, I'm sorry, it's why these things happen, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much. And here we go, and he says when he gets his cursor back.